What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. Today we're talking about tortoises. I'm so happy that you're on my channel and checking out my videos. You can keep updated with me on Instagram. If you're new here, hello, I'm so happy you're here. My name's Rebecca, or you may know me as Venomous from Instagram. Either way, if you're returning or if you're new, I'm so happy that you're here and I really appreciate your support by checking out this video. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe and turn your notifications on. So today's video is all about baby tortoise care specifically. Now, like I say in all of my videos, it depends on the species of tortoise that you keep. So all of the care is very species specific. That means diet, that means habitat, that means everything in between if you're trying to eventually breed them, the humidity levels, their temperature preferences. This gets so detailed, and I always recommend that you check out more than one source for your care, especially for tortoises and other reptiles. So don't just stop at one video, one book, one article, one online source. Keep going, the more the merrier, and you can never have too much knowledge on these animals. There's no video, I don't think, that could properly explain every single thing that goes into taking care of tortoises, because it really depends on your specific animal, your specific area. It gets very personal. So I'm not going to sit here and say that this is the end all be all of tortoise care, but I hope you find it helpful. Now with tortoises, just like every other animal, you have to budget in your time, your resources, and of course your money. These animals live for decades upon decades upon decades, and they may even outlive you. So it's really important that you prioritize their care, which needs to be daily. Some reptiles are a little bit different, like snakes, where you can leave them for a few days if you had to, but tortoises are not one of those reptiles. So this is an everyday animal that requires everyday attention, and these are just some of the basics that I've learned along the way of taking care of a variety of species of tortoises. So one of the most important aspects of keeping reptiles is that you understand that they're ectothermic. I'm sure you've heard that reptiles are cold-blooded, but that doesn't mean that their blood is literally cold. That means that they can't make their own body heat like we can, like mammals can. So we have a lot of different types of energy in our world, and this one specific type of energy is called heat energy, and it's the most common type of energy that's on Earth because it's unusable. So that's actually the reason that mammals like us are warm-blooded. Our body produces a lot of heat energy, which is just excess non-usable energy, and that's what essentially keeps our blood warm, and it allows us to adjust our temperature no matter what environment we're in to an extreme, right? But reptiles are incapable of doing that. Their biology is a little more primitive, so they're designed to survive. And a part of their survival has been this ectothermy. And it just means that they get their body temperature from the environment. So if it's cold outside, or if it's cold where they're at, they will be cold. If it's hot, they will be hot. This is why it's really important that you maintain a gradient for your reptiles. You want to have a hot side, a cool side, so they can regulate themselves as they see fit, which they know what to do. They're born knowing. But this does put a pressure on you to provide the proper captive care, the proper husbandry, the proper species-specific habitat for these animals. So here are some very basic baby tortoise starters that you're gonna need. So we have the ZooMed reptile lamp stand that I use all the time for my baby tortoise habitats, because again, you want to keep that gradient of hot side and a cold side that they will be able to choose themselves how to regulate their own bodies. I also have the Solar Glow all-in-one sun simulating bulb. Now this one here is the 160 watt that I actually am using for my Uromastyx, but for baby tortoises I typically recommend something like the 125 watt, so that just means it's not as hot. But this is your all-in-one one-stop shop bulb that is my absolute favorite. It has UVA, UVB, UVC, and this is basically like the sun. So if you can't keep your baby tortoises outdoors with the real sun, this is the absolute best bulb you can have. Now, one thing about these bulbs, they go bad after about 3 months. They lose some of that UV, even though the bulb's still on. So you do need to replace them about every 3 months to have the proper UV. Here I have a timer, which is just really helpful. You plug in your lamp to this that goes into the outlet, and you should typically have 8 hours on, 8 hours off. So I like my lights to come on at 8 a.m. and then they go off around like 6 p.m. They're really helpful, and so you don't have to switch them on and off manually, but if you prefer that, it's totally fine. So here is the typical stand setup that I have. So I have the light stand, the light fixture, and the light bulb. So again, you do need a fixture for that light bulb. And here's what the bulb looks like. It's a very large, very hot bulb that you want to be careful with. This isn't the best fixture that I have right now because it doesn't have hooks. So usually the other ones have a hook that you would put on this portion a little bit better, but this is just an example that I have here. And then of course you need a setup for the baby tortoises to live in. So where do they go with all of this? So here is a very basic, typical setup that we use for our baby tortoises that is really, really great in my opinion. I like to keep things a little more simple. There are some others that do a lot more elaborate tortoise setups, but you just want to be careful if you have too many things inside of there that they can flip themselves over, and that would be bad. So this is actually the bottom portion of a rabbit cage. And it's really great for our baby tortoises. We were keeping this outside, so I drilled some holes really unevenly so it would drain if it got rained on. So just keep that in mind. If you want it to drain, just drill some holes in the bottom. Then you're gonna lay your substrate, your hides, then your tortoises. It's really, really simple. I love this setup, and this is what I send to all of my customers or any followers who ask me how to properly create a setup for their baby tortoises. For the redfoot tortoises, they can stay in here for about a year. For the giant tortoises, they grow a lot faster, so you will have to upgrade a lot more frequently. But this is just a really basic setup that we love to use. Once you understand that, you will take the steps for the specific species that you're keeping, and I'm sure you'll keep them happy. This isn't always something easy, and sometimes you adjust along the way to find what works for you, your animal, and your life. But we always have to keep in mind that these animals depend on us for something very, very important, which is their body temperature and essentially the way they survive. But one of the most important things about understanding baby tortoises is that if you get a fresh, new little baby hatchling, they are very, very fragile. Yes, they're born with shells, but in the egg, they're actually folded up. So as they are hatched, they have a little egg sac that is the attachment point when they're in their egg. So over about a week's time, this will absorb into the new baby tortoise once they've hatched out of the egg, and that's when they typically start eating. But you want to keep in mind that for a few months, they're still going to be really fragile. That shell is brand new, and it's made of the same stuff that our fingernails are made of. So if you have weaker nails, like me, who's worn fake nails for years and years, it's going to be a little bit soft in the beginning. So we really want to beefy them up and get that shell hard, because that's going to make them indestructible, as we like to say. But of course, no animal's indestructible, and don't put that to the test. It's starting to rain out here, but I kind of like it. Does anyone else like rain, or is that just me? Okay, so I'm back. It's a little less rainy. It's still cloudy, but that's okay. So the next most important aspect of raising up a baby tortoise is their diet. So no matter what the species is, I always say the care is species specific. One of the most important parts of that is going to be their diet. But no matter what species you're working with, you're going to want to include a variety in their diet. That's going to be the most important thing. Mixing it up, think about if you ate the same thing every single day, you're probably not going to get all of the nutrition that you need. So it's the same thing for tortoises, and mixing it up is always the best way to go. I'm going to look at the species that you're working with and that diet, because what's perfect for one could actually be very harmful to another. And I just want to mention what we use for our larger tortoises. We have these panels, because when the tortoises eat, really like all the time that they eat, they don't care. They stomp all over it, they stomp on each other, they drag food around. So it's pretty much guaranteed that there's going to be some debris on the food, and we just don't want them to ingest anything they shouldn't, because there is a risk for impaction in reptiles, which just means their stomachs get blocked with things they shouldn't be eating. So we try to prevent that as much as possible. So we use these panels, these large panels. Now, ideally, black isn't the best color if it's sitting in the sun, but this is just what we have, so this is what we ended up using kind of on a whim, because I ended up purchasing these from Amazon, and it actually comes together as like a cheap dresser type of thing, but obviously it didn't work for what I needed. We did keep the panels, and they've been really, really useful for us. So it's like a cheap dresser that you can buy on Amazon, and it comes with a ton of these panels, like a lifelong supply of these panels. And we use them from everything from tortoises to lizards and whatever else. So they've become very, very useful to us. So I thought I'd pass on the information, and I hope that's helpful. Guys, I want to talk to you about the tortoise diets, which again, I told you that variety is the most important thing when it comes to your reptile diet care. No matter what the species, you want to mix it up as much as possible, because think about if you had to eat the same thing every single day, you would not get the nutrition that you needed. So it's the same for these animals as well. And keep in mind, these animals eat a lot. They eat every single day. It's not like a snake where you can feed them once a week and get away with it. They need to eat every single day, and they will be up looking for their food. So this is something you want to have available for them, because there's a risk if you don't put food out every day that they eat things they shouldn't. So diet is probably one of the most important things for tortoise care. When they're babies, you want to chop it up. That seems to help them a lot, and we're going to talk about some of the things that I like to use. So I'm going to give you a rundown, some of the things that I like to get at your local grocery stores. Now, again, you have to budget for your tortoises. This is something that you really need to think about, because you're going to be spending a lot of money on this. I have found some tips and tricks, such as going through restaurant suppliers to get larger quantities of things. But again, if you have like a Costco or a BJ's, that'll probably really help. I just go to my local grocery store and it is more expensive. So I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about these items, why I like to use them, how frequently, and so on. Okay, the first time I recorded this, apparently the camera didn't do any of it, so everything's kind of messy now, but I'm gonna try again. So the first thing I'm gonna start out with is our spring mix. So spring mix, I would say, is their favorite leafy green ever, of course, because it's the most expensive. You can buy, this is pretty much the largest size you can buy in the grocery stores, even if it's Costco or Sam's Club. I have had luck going through restaurant suppliers and getting huge bags of spring mix, but this stuff does go bad pretty quickly, and you don't want to feed leafy greens that are like slimy and nasty. That means that there's a lot of bacteria on it. So sometimes if you put a paper towel in here, it'll soak up that extra moisture, but I go through this stuff so fast, it's never a problem. So the leafy greens are very delicate and fancy, and sometimes they have spinach in it. I try to get the ones that only say baby lettuce or baby greens. Sometimes they have spring mix that says spinach, so avoid that, because spinach is high in oxalic acid, which in a high enough quantity can be very, very toxic to your tortoises and all reptiles. So keep that in mind, lizards and things like that. If you have spinach in here, you can just pick it out, but if you forget for one day, it's not going to kill your tortoise most likely. So don't worry too much about that, but just be aware of it. So the next thing I have here is turnip greens. I actually haven't fed turnip greens before, so this is kind of something I'm experimenting with. I do know that turnips are toxic, so I wouldn't feed this often, but I am going to experiment just to kind of mix it up into their diet, and they didn't have much else at Walmart, so this is what I got. I also got mustard greens. They don't seem to love mustard greens, but I buy it just to have variety. I also always buy the dandelion lettuce if they have that, because it has high vitamins for them, which are great. But again, the mustard greens once in a while should be totally fine, so I like to just mix it in. Next, I have the romaine. So romaine lettuce is a lot of water. It doesn't have much nutritional content, but it is the cheapest. So I buy a bunch of bags of these and just kind of throw it in all the time. I feed this very, very often, and they seem to be okay. You just want to be careful that if you're feeding a lot of items that are high in water, that when they go to the bathroom, it might be very loose and watery, and that's not good for them. So just make sure you're not feeding watermelon, romaine, iceberg lettuce. I stay away from iceberg lettuce 100%. It has almost zero nutrition and it's all water, so there's really no point. But romaine, you can add that or feed it often like I do. The next thing I have here are tomatoes. So we know tomatoes are pretty high in acid, so this is something I feed when I'm like running out of leafy greens. So this is once in a while I feed it to them. They seem to pick at it, and it's probably not their favorite, but when you have nothing else, they'll eat it. Next thing I have here are grapes. So grapes are high in sugar, so this is something you want to avoid feeding all the time for your herbivorous reptiles. But the redfoots can tolerate it a little bit more often, but they don't seem to really love grapes, so most of the time this is for us. Next, I have bananas. So bananas are extremely high in sugar, so you really don't want to be feeding this to your tortoises every single day. But again, if it's something that you just have and you don't have other things, it's all right for that day. You can just throw the whole banana, peel and everything. Just make sure you take off those stickers, and it's just nice to have because it's cheap, and it's a good thing to just have as an emergency food item if you don't have anything else. Again, very, very high in sugar, so it should not be fed often. Next thing I have here is the papaya. So this is like the holy grail of fruit when it comes to tortoises, especially the redfoot tortoises, because in the wild, papaya is one of their main diets. So we do have papaya trees around. We're going to be planting some more. Just remove the seeds when you feed them because the seeds are toxic. So yeah, papaya is also very, very great for tortoises that aren't feeling so well. They will usually sell their souls for a papaya, so we use this for tortoises that aren't feeling so well. We just want them to eat. If there's something wrong, papaya is the way to go to kind of give them a treat. And it's pretty low in sugar, so this is a great fruit to have around. I would recommend planting those papaya trees. They grow extremely fast, they fruit very quickly, so they're great for us, and we really like feeding your tortoises this once in a while. It is very high in water content, so it is quite like juicy and watery, so it's not an everyday thing, but once a week, once every 2 weeks, I think that's totally fine based on my own experience. Right, next I have here blueberries. So I actually really love feeding blueberries to my tortoises because I can just grab a handful and throw it, and it kind of makes them search for it. This is the type of enrichment, so it keeps their minds occupied. When animals are in captivity, they can get bored, and that can cause some illnesses, sickness, stress. So we want to keep our animals' minds stimulated as much as their bodies. It's just as important. So I like to use blueberries for that. They do have some sugar, so it's not an everyday thing, but I do feed blueberries frequently. Next, I have these beautiful strawberries. So you guys know these are quite sweet. It's not something I feed often to my herbivorous or grassland reptiles, but the redfoot tortoises like the strawberries, and I feed the redfoots a lot more fruit than I would feed any other tortoise species. So just keep in mind that redfoots can tolerate a lot more sugar, and they do have a more fruit-oriented diet. Next, I have sweet potato. So sweet potato is a root, and it's quite hard, as you may know. So I do have to boil these before I feed them to the tortoises, and this is really like a treat, or if I'm running low on other things, but they do seem to enjoy it, and it's quite cheap, so I buy a few bags of this at a time. They don't go bad, and they're pretty easy to deal with. So I just boil them up, throw them in there, and the tortoises seem to appreciate it. So sweet potato seem to be okay once in a while. Next, I have this thing. This is a malanga. And malanga is a root, so we actually don't feed the root to the tortoises, but we will be planting these because this produces a really beautiful elephant ear-like plant that is actually one of the main diets for Galapagos tortoises in the wild. So we're hoping to plant this around, and it will be really great for our grassland tortoise species. So we'll be planting these, and hopefully we have some luck. In Florida, I know that you can really just like throw these on the ground and they start growing. So hopefully we have the same luck. Okay, the next thing I want to show you is our Mazuri. So this is the regular Mazuri. It's these large roundish pellets. And when it comes to feeding the baby tortoises, we will put these in a little container and soak them in water because it makes them a lot more squishy and easier to eat. For the adult redfoots, we use these and we just throw them there, and they seem to enjoy them a lot. Reptiles actually like Mazuri a little bit too much, and you have to be careful because this is something you should be feeding only once a week, once every 10 days, even better, because it's very high in protein, and this can cause pyramiding in tortoises. So pyramiding is that abnormal shell formation that's like a pyramid. So there are a few species that are an exception where they do pyramid naturally, but we're not talking about those today. We're talking about mostly just like the tortoises that I have. So I don't have any star tortoises, which is what they're called. So Mazuri is great to have. This is what like your zoos use all the time. This is kind of like the dog food form for tortoises, and they make a variety of diets for exotic animals. So definitely check them out. This is the regular tortoise of Mazuri. We don't feed this to our grassland species. We feed a different type of Mazuri, which I'll show you in a minute. But these are great for the redfoots. I'd say once a week to once every 10 days should be your standard. So the next Mazuri I want to show you is the Mazuri LS. So we buy huge bags of this because we have a lot of grassland species here. And I don't know if you can see, but they're much, much smaller than the regular Mazuri. So they're much smaller. Much smaller, and Mazuri LS stands for low starch. So this is higher in starch and higher in protein. So it's not really the best thing for your grassland species, but this is pretty much like hay and other stuff compacted into like that dog food form. So it's really great for your grassland species, but again, it should be fed basically every 10 days is a good standard. You buy the big bags, and you can get these at feed stores or online from like chewy.com, so definitely something really great to have around. The last thing I'm going to show you is our hay. So personally, I have not had any success with our tortoises eating hay, and I think that's maybe because I bought this from a pet store, and this is really like what they sell for rabbits and small mammals like that. So it might not be as fresh as the tortoises may prefer. So I will be experimenting with some fresher hay from feed stores. But you can see this is the Western Timothy and Orchid Grass blend. Now you really want to stay away from Timothy and alfalfa hay. Orchid Grass is really the best hay that you could get for your tortoises. And that's kind of like that bluish hay, so really, really delicious for the tortoises when it's fresh. But this does have some other uses. We like to use this when we store our tortoises or we have to transport them in bins. We lay a bunch of hay down because it's super absorbent. It really takes away any odors. And they like to like nestle and bury in it. So it is very, very useful to just have around as well. Now keep in mind, this is just what I have right now and what I'm showing you for my tortoise diets. This should not be your standard for tortoise diets, and remember that it depends on the species of tortoise you have. So do as much research as possible. You know, watch as many videos, read as many articles or books, or talk to professionals to get the best idea for what the right diet is for your specific tortoise species. It's really, really important that you don't just feed the same things to all tortoises no matter what, because what's perfect for one could be extremely harmful for another. So just do your research, do right by your animals, and I'm sure that you got this just right. So I hope that this helps you. I hope you find this video useful. I hope you find these items useful that I am using right now. I would say that I go produce shopping just for tortoises every 2 weeks max, but it's a lot of the time sooner than that. So keep in mind you have to budget for your animals. Tortoises eat every single day, and they're really relying on you for that, because if they don't have food around, they'll start getting into things that they shouldn't, and sometimes they'll eat rocks, which they could choke, they could die, you know, and that's just so preventable. So just keep in mind you want to always have a diet that's a variety diet for your tortoises, and they will be extremely happy. So yeah, I hope this helps you guys. So their shells are pretty fragile in the beginning. You're going to want to feed them a proper variety diet, which again, diet is very species specific, and I just really want to highlight that variety is the most important thing. That's how you can make your animal very strong, and that's really going to help them toughen up those brand new and fragile shells. Kind of think about your own fingernails, you know, it takes time for them to be strong, and it's the same thing for tortoise shells. So that's just a tip that you really want to be extra careful in the beginning with touching them or handling them, or them being with others that could stomp on them and things like that. We typically don't want to put a tiny tortoise with the larger one, because this can cause problems or even death for that smaller tortoise. The next most important aspect of raising baby tortoises specifically, because it does get a little bit harder as they're older and you can transition to a water dish when they're bigger instead of doing this. But when they're babies, you need to soak them all the time, every day. That's really the most ideal thing to do. Reptiles are really susceptible to dehydration, and this includes baby tortoises especially. So you're going to want to soak them every day if possible, if not every other day minimum. Soaking your tortoises is extremely important. When they're babies, it's not recommended to keep a water dish with your baby tortoises, because there is a risk of them walking in there and flipping over, and then they could potentially drown. Now, I know some people keep a water dish, and if it's shallow enough and small enough, it's probably completely fine, but you just want to keep that in mind, that them flipping over is a huge problem. It's a huge risk, and when you add a water dish, it could just be more risky. So we don't choose to keep water dishes in the habitats with our baby tortoises, but once they get to be a good enough size, we do. So I just wanted to show you some of the soaking dishes that I'm using. These are literally from the Dollar Tree, okay? The real dollar store, where everything's $1. And so these bins are great for soaking the little baby tortoises, so I just grab a bunch of them. And we actually do a lot of Dollar Tree shopping for our animals that actually is really helpful and kind of perfect for what we need. So maybe one day, if you're interested, leave a comment below if you'd like me to do a Dollar Tree haul where you see some of the things we use for our reptiles. These dishes are just simple. You want to just make sure that they can't see through them, so any color would do, because if they see through things, they can feel a little bit insecure, they try to get out, they can act a little crazy. So you can use anything from a plant saucer to just a normal plastic bin, and I'm going to be soaking the redfoot baby tortoises now. These are pretty new, only a few weeks old, so I'm going to place them in the water, and this is something I do daily. You can see that they're growing nicely, and that little egg sac that they're attached to from their shells is absorbing just perfectly. This is something to keep an eye on, and you can see they are all kind of at different levels, but it's pretty cool to check out. So my biggest recommendation for soaking tortoises, it's pretty simple, but you need to keep an eye on it. I recommend that you set an alarm on your phone because it's really easy to forget about these guys soaking, and I've definitely been guilty of that before. Luckily, I've been lucky and nothing bad has happened, but if you forget about them and they flip over, there are some risks of them drowning, so just keep an eye on it. I'd say soaking them anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes a day would suffice, but longer could be even better. Soaking your tortoises allows them to hydrate, as you can see them all starting to drink here. So I'm going to place the bigger redfoot tortoises you see here, and this isn't typical, I'm kind of just doing it for the video, but it is safe as long as they are the same species. If you're going to soak tortoises of various sizes like this, definitely keep a close eye on it that nobody gets stepped on and everyone is safe. Now, along with hydration, this also really helps facilitate your tortoises using the bathroom. It's pretty much guaranteed that they're going to go to the bathroom, so once this happens, we do take them out, change the water, and sometimes I put them back into a water dish. This really helps your tortoises stay regulated because they're not always the best at using the bathroom on their own, so if you have any concerns about them being blocked, soaking them will ease all of those issues. Now, once your tortoises are too large for soaking, we do use water dishes. We like to use these plant saucers. They seem to be really helpful. They're not too big that we risk drowning, but we really like using these for our tortoises. The next baby tortoise tip I have for you is all about substrate. Substrate is the flooring or the bedding that you keep in your tortoise habitat, and it's really important that we have the proper substrate for them. And not using wild moss just because there could be a lot of parasites or bugs, and who knows if that's legal wherever you are taking the moss from. We like using this moss for hatchlings because it's very soft on those fragile yolk sacs, and it also holds a great amount of humidity. Now, for the very fresh new hatchling baby tortoises, we like to use moss. This is the forest moss from Exoterra that you can buy online, so we recommend buying it instead of taking it from the wild. You just never know what's in there. Also, moss dries up quick, so spray it often. You're keeping them indoors on a specific substrate, it's going to be really important to check it for molds, for any pests like that, because it can happen if you let it sit for too long. So just keep an eye on that, and that's another tip for you. The next baby tortoise tip I have for you can really be applied to tortoises of all ages and sizes as well, because all tortoises really appreciate a hide or multiple hides in their habitats. When you're purchasing hides, just make sure that the edges are flat and not very climbable. It's definitely a problem if your tortoises are climbing the sides of their hides because they could potentially flip over. And if you're not there, this could actually cause them to die, or they could climb up and escape their habitat. So if you're purchasing online, which there is a variety of them, just make sure you keep those tips in mind. For our fresh hatchling baby tortoises that are outdoors, we have these plastic cups just cut in half, which is only because we didn't have anything else at the moment, and we are keeping these outdoors without a light. If you had a heat lamp on these, it would be a little more dangerous, a fire hazard, they could melt, and so on. So the next tip for raising baby tortoises is to check on them every single day. So this is really important for many reasons. Again, tortoises are a reptile you need to be caring for daily, checking in on daily. Flipping upside down is one of the most dangerous things for them, and it's so simple, but it really is very dangerous for them, and we never want that to happen. So always check on them every day. You also want to make sure that they're eating. You'll know that something is very, very wrong if your tortoise is not eating for a day, or if he stays in the same place every day. That's a huge indicator that something's wrong and that he could be sick. The next tip for raising baby tortoises, and this also applies to grown tortoises as well, is that eventually they're probably going to need to go outside. Now, depending on where you live, you might have to make some modifications, but no matter what, you should always still check on them. And this is important for a couple reasons. First is going to be any bacteria infections that you can maybe catch early on. Say if they hurt themselves and then bacteria got in, the earlier you catch it, the earlier you can treat it and most likely cure it. Also in Florida, we really are susceptible to fungal infections here. So specifically because we're so humid, we get a lot of water, we have a lot of fungal issues here for many captive collections. So you're always going to want to check for any fungal spots on their shells, especially if you're keeping them outdoors. Usually as babies you keep them inside, so you're probably not going to have an overly wet environment, but it's always a good thing to just check them out, check their shells, check the plaster on the carapace and things like that as much as you can. Another really important factor to think about when checking them every day is for any pests. So this really goes for mostly when they're staying outdoors, but it can absolutely happen when they're staying indoors as well. So any fleas, any ticks, any mites, things like that, you're going to want to frequently check for. Overall, keeping tortoises can be a very fragile thing, and it's really important that we want to give them the highest quality of life possible. Tortoises rely on you along with any other animal that you choose to keep. So I hope this helps, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you keep tortoises yourself, or if you want to keep tortoises and have any other questions, just leave them in the comments below. And don't forget to keep updated with me on Instagram. Thanks again for supporting my channel. I really appreciate you guys, and I'll see you next time.